With the NBA trade deadline approaching in just a few weeks on March 25th, there is always questions about which players are potentially on the move, who will stay put, and for the Bulls, this has been a topic for discussion, not only from what I've seen in the comments on this channel, but also what I've seen elsewhere in social media, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, as basketball fans, we can all be a bit reactionary or a prisoner of the moment based on how a player is currently performing and how it can change our views about them from a day-to-day basis. I myself fall prey to this often, and as Bulls fans, we've gone through our fair share of players who have been inconsistent and have led us to go back and forth on who should stay with the team and who should go. Now, we knew this going into the season with a new front office that this was going to be an assessment year to see how the roster fits with the new coaching staff and the plan for the future, because I think Arturas firmly believes this is a roster with talent, but understanding what pieces work with what he's trying to build for the future, and that's key on how they plan to move forward. So just to be clear, I actually don't think the Bulls will be making any big trades before the deadline unless they're able to get a steal of a trade. I think things will actually be pretty quiet for the trade deadline, and I actually think that will be the case across the league, as most of the bigger stars are mainly spoken for, whether they signed long-term extensions, so it wouldn't make sense for their team to try and move them after extending them. And then of course James Harden, he was already traded. That was sort of the big one that everyone was anticipating in terms of which stars would be moved. And I think for the front office, they're not going to want to make any moves prematurely. They're going to be very methodical in their approach. I know a lot of you have been saying we absolutely need to make a move in trading Coby White or Lauri Markkanen or even Wendell Carter Jr. I think it's important to keep in mind that all of these players are still young in their careers, and there are a lot of players in NBA history, players who went on to be stars or even Hall of Famers for that matter, who started out their career slow and teams gave up on them too early. I'm not saying these guys are going to be Hall of Famers, and they may even, not progress into being star players either, but without a strong trade offer for any of these three players, I don't think the front office is going to make any rash decisions on that. And I think the question you have to ask is whether between the start of the season and the deadline, if that was enough time for the front office to truly assess the roster and seeing what fits, since this whole season has been consolidated. Now, I think most of us can agree that there is no player on this roster that is untouchable in terms of being considered for a trade, with the exception of Patrick Williams. And that's because Williams isn't better than everyone else on the roster, but rather because he's a rookie with a lot of potential that they invested a high draft pick in, and it's actually the only recent draft pick on this roster that was selected by the new front office. But outside of him, yes, even Zach Lavine, nobody's safe from being considered in a trade. Now, when we talk about what trades for this roster makes sense, because I know a lot of you ask in the comments, well, who do you think the Bulls should trade? Because when I see people saying we need to trade Markkanen ASAP because he's soft, or we need to trade Coby White because he sucks as a point guard, well, yeah, I usually respond by saying, well, let's pump the brakes on those talks because they're incredibly reactionary. And the question in turn that I get is, well, then who would you trade? The problem with a question like this is it depends. Trade scenarios can vary so much, and it's all dependent on where a current team is at in their time frame for contention and if a trade fits that goal and timeline. I feel like in years past, the Bulls have been made very poor trades without a sense of direction or rationale behind them, other than simply trying to make a change because something just wasn't working. This new front office, I'd like to think, is a little more competent than that, and that they have the ability to think long-term and be more strategic in their approach, and hopefully they're looking at trade options that would be a net benefit for the organization. And to be honest, I don't think trading any of the current starting lineup, and I'm including Wendell in that, should be moved prior to the deadline. The offseason, that's a different story, especially when you factor in free agency opportunities into that as well. But as far as trading any of those top 5 guys in the next few weeks, I would say no, again, unless you're able to get a significant return for them that is just too good to pass up. And that return should also be centered around building for the future, not just trading for a well-known name who is past their prime just to draw more fans and attention to the team. Now, guys like Otto Porter, Denzel Valentine, Tomas Satoransky, these are all guys who are on expiring contracts and will likely probably be off the team next season since they're not really a part of the Bulls' long-term plans. If you can get something, a little bit of something for them in the form of assets, rather than just letting them walk for nothing, I mean, yeah, you do that. At the beginning of the season, you probably could have gotten something decent for Otto Porter from a contending team, especially because he was playing so well to start the season. But now with the back issues he's been having and with the way that he's been playing, he's been pretty mediocre at best. So I'm not sure you could really get much for him, especially on an expiring deal. But if there were guys on this roster that you would be looking to trade, it would be one of them coming off the bench, guys that aren't a part of the future of this franchise. And I know a lot of you guys have asked, why haven't we traded Felicio? Why is he still on this team? Well, that's because Garpax gave him a contract that should have never been given in the first place, and no other team is going to want to take on that kind of contract, or him as a player for that matter. So we just have to wait until his contract expires, which is at the end of the season. Now, obviously, trading for one of those starters could lead to very intriguing packages. So especially if the front office is looking to move Lavine, because his trade value is probably the highest it's ever been. But as much as I'm, not necessarily the biggest fan of Lavine, you guys already know that, you've been watching the channel, I do think it's probably best to keep him at least for the remainder of the season, because he has shown to be improving his overall decision making. Aside from last night, playing better team ball, showing up more as a team leader, not playing hero ball, and helping the team actually trying to win. And again, he's only 25. It would be a different conversation if Zach was, say, 29 years old. So I don't think it makes sense to try to move Zach before the deadline unless you can get significant value for him, because he has shown to improve his game. He's still young and improving every season, and he's not on an expiring contract, so you don't have to worry about losing him for nothing if you don't trade him before the deadline. There's still time to assess how he fits within this franchise overall. Now, Markkanen, for him, it's a little more tricky, right? Because he will be a restricted free agent, and if the Bulls are hesitant to sign or match a large contract offered by another team, because I do think some team will throw a large offer his way, then yeah, they should consider looking to move him to get value in return rather than losing him for nothing. But I firmly believe, despite his inconsistencies at times and his injury concerns in the past, the Bulls should hold on to him for the rest of the season, see how he plays out the rest of the year, and try to retain him for a reasonable amount, because 7-foot big men that can spread the floor and shoot well from three, but also drive to the basket are rare to come by. I know a lot of you talk about how Markkanen's game is limited in just his ability to shoot from outside, but I actually disagree with that. I think not only can he shoot, but he's a decent scorer in the paint, and he can be aggressive in getting his own shot down low, and he's been playing better defense as well this season. I know he hasn't been rebounding the best for his size, but we've seen, from him, at least in his first 2 seasons, he has the ability to be a strong rebounder. He was averaging 9 rebounds a game his sophomore season. So my hope is he'll be able, to getting back to his form and crashing the boards. He does need to improve his post-up game and footwork overall if he wants to be a skilled player in the paint, but he is only 23. Still time for him to improve on those aspects of his game. Now for Coby White, I've talked about this before, but it's still just too early to give up on this guy. He's only in his second season and averaging over 15 points per game and 5.7 assists. Those are decent numbers. They're not great, but they're decent. As I've said before, the problem with Coby is I just don't think that he's cut out to be a point guard. He's in a position that is not designed for him. He has had games where he's shown some good floor control and running the offense, but then there are games where he's just been a little all over the place and sometimes doesn't mesh well with Lavine. But as I've said, he's one of these guys that despite his flaws, he has a strong work ethic in wanting to get better and improve areas of his game that he's been tasked with. So do I think Coby should be a part of the Bulls' long-term plan, especially running the point? Not necessarily. I wouldn't go that far, but should we go ahead and just pull the trigger as far as trading him within the next few weeks? No, I think it's too early for that because his skill set could change. But the question I have for you guys in all of this, do you think the Bulls should trade anyone before the trade deadline? Give me one person that you would want to trade and why you think we should trade them. Let me know in the comments. And guys, as always, be sure to subscribe. If you're a Bulls fan, feel free to join the Discord. It is absolutely free. I'll leave that linked in the description. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.